Thank you for joining me for the 150th episode of the Confidence Through Health podcast. It's a great milestone to hit. And for this episode, I bring back Dr. Mahmud Kara of Kara MD to talk about hydration. We sort of teased it at the end of the last episode we did with him, episode 139. And this time we spent a whole episode talking about hydration and the importance of water, the importance of electrolytes. How are you getting your water? Is all liquid the same? How does hydration affect chronic disease? All of these things. Hydration is hugely important. Our bodies that we walk around in are mostly water. And if we're not feeding ourselves water or ingesting water, we're definitely eliminating water. And what's the balance in that? And we talk about that. We talk about how much you get in, how much you get out, and why it's important and why it's not important to look at those numbers. Because it is important, but it's also not necessarily. We talk about how the majority of people walking around are underhydrated and what can we do about it? And he talks about his new product, Pure IV, and there's a discount code if you'd like to try that out at his website. The discount code is simply Jerry Snyder 20. I'll have that linked in the show notes, and there's a link that you can use to get straight to that. If you go through this episode and you're like, hey, I think I need to use that product. Or if you're just realizing that, you're underhydrated, you're not getting the electrolytes you need and you need help. I know he would be more than willing to help you with that as well. So you can find his social media and website information in the show notes as well. So I think you're going to learn a lot from this episode. Hydration is hugely important. Like I said, not just for athletes. It's important for all of us because without water intake, we will suffer and our health will decline. Well, thank you, Dr. Kara, for being a guest again on the Confidence Through Health podcast. I really appreciate it.
Of course, I actually, I remember after the last time thinking I actually enjoyed that. That
was great.
It's unfortunately it's not fun that you can meet somebody that we can talk about these things. Most people, especially for better or for worse, perhaps other doctors and what have you, most of them are like, yeah, whatever, and then you get some other practitioners,
Right.
and they tend to be way out on the left or the right somewhere.
Right. Yep.
So I remember really enjoying the conversation I had with you. I thought, he's got it right. He knows what he's doing. And, this is a plug to you, but
Sure.
I truly mean it. You give good advice. And I can
thank you.
safely say to people who are watching this, he gives good advice. He really does. So listen, I took away from some of the stuff you said.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Well, but like we ended the other episode, we started to just briefly get into hydration. And
Yes.
I was like, we got to go into this bigger because I think as we talked about a little bit, like hydration can do so much from just the chronic disease standpoint, the traditional chronic diseases. Yeah. It can do so much in preventing, but also in some cases reversing those diseases if they're not too far along, correct?
Did you see the study that just was announced yesterday?
No, I haven't seen that.
NIH, yeah, they did. Just a recent study. NIH just announced it yesterday from their cardiovascular and lung division. A study, I think 12,000. It was retrospective. Okay. It was 12,000. They took an interesting take on it. They looked at sodium levels as a measurement because, of course, they can't really go back and say how many glasses. There's no indicator. Unfortunately, this should be a lesson to us. We don't do that in medicine. We don't ask people how much are you drinking.
Right.
We don't because they couldn't find these numbers. But anyway, so they looked at and they found that low on if you're on either end, low sodium or higher sodium, it does impact a lot of things: cardiovascular health,
right,
sudden mortality. Yeah, so dying prematurely was affected by that. And some chronic diseases as well. So they're looking at it now as preventative measures. Medicine unfortunately is not quite where it should be, but they're considering hydration as one of the things they should be telling people as a preventative measure.
Right.
And it literally just came out yesterday.
Nice. Well, and I mean hydration from the standpoint of like you said, if salt and sugar are two of the big you can add in processed flour. Like those are some of the big drivers of some of the chronic diseases we have. And it's not just that like, oh, I had a little bit of sugar. It's the extreme amounts, right? It's you've gone overboard, well over what any single person should have, maybe in a year, and you're doing it in a week, which is pretty standard, I think, in the standard American diet. Most people are in that range, unfortunately. Hydrating enough, correct me if I'm wrong, but that helps flush some of that stuff out before it can grab hold in your body.
Yeah, it's this double-edged sword that you have to be careful with, right? So on the one hand, electrolytes like sodium, potassium, all these minerals, I mean, if we were throwing in other minerals, they're very necessary. Unfortunately, sugar is necessary. We can't live without, but you don't want much. You don't want, first of all, you don't, as you and I discussed on the last one, you don't want the artificial sweeteners. They're not good for you.
Right.
If you're going to get sugar, you want it in its pure form. So you don't want fructose, cornstarch, etc. Glucose is a very simple sugar, but like you said, you don't want too much of it. So it's that balance, right? It's that delicate balance of you need the water to go with it because it can't be processed. It can't be used in the metabolic processes. It can't cross cellular barriers. It can't cross blood-brain barrier. It can't be used for the immune system without water. Right. These are absolutely essential. We can't survive without sodium. We can't survive without potassium. The study made it very clear that on either end, it's not good. And so what is the medium that keeps all of that where it should be? It's water. Right. It's without water, none of it works. Right. So yeah, absolutely. It's a tough balance sometimes.
Yeah. And I know that we've gone, there's so many different products out there, right? Like that tout on, especially when it comes to, I know they hit the athletes and the exercise people, whether you're an athlete or not, but if you're doing a lot of exercise, there's all different products out there to help you, rehydrate or this, that, and the other thing. Which some of those are good. And some of those, I think, like you said, some of them will put your body overboard as far as the levels that you need in those electrolytes.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. Especially sugar.
Yeah. And that's what a lot of them have, too much sugar, because they're trying to make it taste good. Because if you're just going to, if you're going to down a drink of B12 or something, it's probably not going to taste very good. Unless you're going to add something to it. And so understanding that balance and some of that takes an understanding of your own body and understanding how your body operates, right? Because one of the things I tell people oftentimes is if you're suffering from headaches, especially if it's post-exercise headaches, you're more than likely just not hydrated enough.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's, fluid electrolyte homeostasis. It's why we put the two together. There is electrolyte homeostasis. There is fluid homeostasis. Right. But from a clinical standpoint, you rarely want to look at one or the other. You always want to look at it as fluid and electrolyte homeostasis. And it's for that it's because of some of the reasons, so many organ systems. I mean, if you really look at it, how do you know you're dehydrated? That's like a really fair question, right? How do you know you're dehydrated? From a symptom standpoint, headaches, absolutely. That's one of them. Right. Cramps. Yep. Cramps in the body. That's one of the signs of dehydration. Thirst, it's an obvious one. Right. Lethargy, difficulty concentrating, tiredness, etc. There's skin dryness, especially in older people. You can sometimes. But then there's the less obvious one, which is the color of your urine. I used to always coach patients is, what is your urine like? It's one of the first things we look at when when doing hospital rounds. Right. You do strict I's and O's, right? Input versus output, and the output is. So what we always do is, as nurses and doctors, I remember always when I would go in, especially somebody getting IVs, is you pick up the bag, and so the bag would have the numbers of how much is the output, but also we used to hammer into our head, look at the urine first. Right. So you look at the urine. Is it dark in color? Is it blood stained? Is it whatever? Is it blah, blah, blah? But what's the color of the urine? Yeah. And that's a very important indicator because what is ultimately the most important organ in the body for fluid and electrolyte homeostasis? The kidneys.
Right.
So that, it tells you if your urine is concentrated, that's a message coming from your kidney saying, hey, I'm holding water back. I'm not letting the water out. I'm holding it back because you don't have enough of it.
Right.
It starts with the color, and then it'll actually reduce the amount of urine. So I used to always tell people, how much are you urinating? What color is it? And so it tells you everything in the body responds in one way or another to hydration. It really is. And headaches, big time. Muscle cramping, big time. It's one of two very important indicators.
Yeah. Well, and as a runner myself, endurance athlete, like a lot of people, both whether I'm coaching or just running in the community or running races against them, or even my own personal family practice doctor, he's a runner, and so we talk about it occasionally, like, and he's like, oh man, I did this half marathon and I started cramping, or somebody else say, oh, I started cramping at mile 12 or whatever, and they're like, yeah, I think I'm low on potassium, or I'm low on whatever it is, and that's why I'm cramping. I'm like, no, you're not drinking enough as you're going through. Like you may also have an imbalance there, but like you said earlier, like if you don't have enough water, it doesn't matter if you have the proper amount of electrolytes in your system, because they're not getting where they need to go. And that's a good illustration of the kidneys holding everything back. And so that also, they're trying to prevent that imbalance, right? Of like, all of a sudden now your blood the viscosity is too thick because you've got all these electrolytes that can't go anywhere, and they're just sitting in the bloodstream.
Absolutely.
And then
absolutely,
that causes a whole nother pressure issue and all kinds of other issues, right?
And that's why, using again the word fluid and electrolyte homeostasis, it's very delicate. If you start to get dehydrated, one of the things that happens is the blood becomes concentrated. What does that mean? That means electrolyte levels, just using broadly speaking, sodium starts to go up.
Right. And
when that happens, fluid homeostasis starts to kick in, and osmosis. Then the body starts to pay attention to osmosis. So if the osmotic gradient in the blood vessel, the extracellular fluid, so any of the fluid that's outside of the cell, if that gradient is high, what's going to happen? It's going to suck water from the cells into the bloodstream.
Right.
And so that's what happens. It's that's why they use sodium as a measurement of hydration. If your sodium levels in the blood are high, you're going to suck water out of the cells and create a level of dehydration in the cells, and vice versa. If your sodium levels are low, it's going to try to eject water and push it into the cells, creating. And you can actually hemolysis. One of the causes of hemolysis which is blood cells breaking apart, is fragmenting. Is overhydration. There is such a thing as drinking too much water, especially if you do it quickly. So it's we keep coming back to this fluid electrolyte homeostasis, that it's very important to be aware of where are your electrolytes, where's your water, all of the above. And there are relatively easy ways of doing it if you pay attention. If you just pay attention to what your body's telling you, it doesn't have to be too complicated. You don't have to be sitting there with, hey, let me draw some blood. What's my sodium level? You don't have to do that. There are easier ways of just evaluating yourself through your own symptoms.
Right. Well, and so one of the things that I always like, and I might be wrong, but what I've experienced myself, and then I correct people, and typically they come back to me and we're like, oh my gosh, that totally fixed my issue, is for runners, like, a lot of times or anybody that's exercising a lot, right? You start sweating, and then, whether you've got the salt stains or you obviously can taste the salt in your sweat, and people always tell me like, oh my gosh, I lost so much salt when I run. I lose so much salt because it's so salty and all this. And they're like, I got to keep taking the salt. And I'm like, no, you got to get more water. And like, if you get more water, you won't be as salty when you sweat because you're using the salt, right? Because it's not just, because otherwise your body's just saying, I've got to get rid of stuff that's in my bloodstream that's toxic or that's whatever. And so I'm getting rid of it. And so it's actually, you're getting rid of the excess. You're not getting rid of like what you're using.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, sweat in particular, electrolytes will follow the water. So the body says, okay, we need to eliminate water. We need to we need to lower the body's temperature. So sweat, what it does is it hits your skin, it evaporates, right? And that evaporation drops the temperature on the skin and drops the core temperature. That's how the body works. It's a very interesting concept. But that water takes electrolytes with it. It's not just water that's on your skin. It forcibly takes electrolytes with it. So yeah, you lose. And it's one of the, making the case for a rehydration beverage or a rehydration drink is sometimes a tough one. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to consume too many electrolytes. Nobody wants you chugging sodium just for the fact that, okay, if you have sodium in your system, it's going to hold water, which is what you do. The two, you have that, again, fluid electrolyte homeostasis. You want both to be at optimal levels. So, I get people that ask me sometimes, well, why don't I what's the downside of just every time I take a hydration drink? Why don't I just take a hydration drink as opposed to drinking sweet water, right? And so going back to that delicate balance is, well, then at that point, you do reach a point where you're getting too much sodium. You want to replace sodium lost in sweat or lost in your bowel movements or but at the same time, you don't want to get too much. And so it's that and for you guys, it's even worse because when you're, especially marathons, you're not doing a sprint for 5 minutes or whatever it is. Or 2. You're going. So you're sweating a lot. So you're losing a lot of. So it is a delicate balance, and usually with the way I do it personally, at least, is I do both. So I do a part of what I'm drinking with electrolytes, and a part of what I'm drinking with straight water. Or in the event of that you're doing a marathon, you just have larger amounts mixed and you just drink it slowly over time. Maybe more dilute forms of it. Like your IV, I created it in a way that should mix with 16 ounces. You don't want it with 8. You could do it with 20, depending on how long, over what period of time, but you have to get the water with it. So you don't want to chronically consume water with no electrolytes. You don't want to chronically consume water with electrolytes. You want that happy balance, especially with you guys. It's even more sensitive.
Well, and I think that's why a lot of people and we've just become accustomed, I think, in this country. It's like we don't really read the directions, right? Like whether it's you get something, you're putting a bed together or whatever. It's like I could figure out how to put a bed together. But a lot of times we do that with our supplements when it says take with 16 ounces or 20 ounces or whatever of water. Or even our medication, it says, take with food or take with water. It's like, we're like, oh, we'll take a sip and drink it and we'll take the supplement and we'll be gone. And it's like you said, that's massively, because if that's a concentrated tablet of whatever electrolyte it is.
It can be, depending on what you're taking. Absolutely. Yeah.
That can massively throw your body off if you're not hydrated enough in the right time frame.
Yeah. And those of us that create stuff responsibly, try to do it in a way that is at appropriate levels and that is going to be mixed with the appropriate amount of water. I mean, we're banking on the fact that you're taking it the way you're supposed to be taking it. Like the Pure IV, which I now take every single day. I take 1 or 2 a day, depending on how many, my level of activity. But you do have to be careful with these things because they taste good. Your body actually likes the salt and likes the sugar. We don't have too much sugar. I did it in what I call euvolemic, so matches the electrolyte homeostasis levels of the body. And darn it tastes good. I mean, what can I say? It's we put natural flavors in there. We put only natural sugars, and you can get carried away easily, especially. I catch every once in a while somebody who, we before we launch any product, we really send it out to a lot of, we have like our focus groups and our internally, and I catch people doing it with less water because they like the taste of it. It's like, this is a hydration product. It is not it's not a drink. It's not meant to be a drink. It's meant to be a hydration product. So please take it with the appropriate amount of water. And if you do, you'll notice a huge difference. I mean, it made a huge difference in my life. I can tell you now, everybody in the office, everybody in the office takes it. And I'll tell you what, Jerry, it is the first product I have ever created that I am worried about product walking out the door.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. It is that good.
Yeah.
You know, I had one other product before that people loved, but it was Total Serenity. I think I told you about it before.
Yeah.
It's a adrenal product. It helps come. That was one that everybody in the office loved. I had half the staff taking it every single day.
Yeah.
I mean, without me telling them. Pure Hydration, Pure IV is one of the other ones. And it's because you feel better.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, when you hydrate yourself, you know what it's like. You feel better. Your body says, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for that. It's so important.
Well, and I mean, your body, all your functions work better. Typically your sleep's better, everything typically starts to fall in line, which again falls like it, you don't even have to really think about the science behind it to understand that, well, if it makes me feel better, then it's going to help prevent all these other issues that are going to happen, from a chronic standpoint, because you're treating your cells right, you're giving them what they want from a hydration standpoint. Now, granted, obviously you have to eat, properly and all that too as well. But this is, it's something that it's like, to me, it's just unbelievable that there's so many people that are not hydrated properly any given moment of the day, and it's somewhere between 50 and 70% is the estimate, right?
It's depending on the estimate. So the study that I told you about, they quoted another study, I think two other studies that said 50%, 50 to 60%. The CDC actually came out with a statement a year or two ago. They said 2/3 to 75%.
Right.
So 65 to 75% of the population is not drinking enough, are not drinking enough fluids.
Right.
And you hear, and I think I mentioned to you this before, is people say, well, I'm getting it from food. It's like, yeah, maybe, but it's hard to get anything more than 20, 30% of your fluid intake from food without overdoing it, without consuming too much, in which case you're consuming too many calories. Typically the foods that have a lot of water in them tend to be the higher sugary foods, watermelon being the great example, melons being another, melons in general. So you're not, or you're overdoing it on stuff that's like cucumbers. You can get water from cucumbers, right? Zucchini is high in, so a few other things, but you'd have to eat so much to get the amount of water that you're overdoing it. You're eating nothing but cucumbers all day.
Right.
Well, that's a nutritional issue now. You're creating some nutritional issues. So 20, 30% is probably what you should be or can be getting from food. The rest, you just have to drink it. Yeah. And, and not with caffeinated beverages, because we know what those do. I mean, a little bit is an antioxidant, a lot of it is a diuretic. So you got to be careful with that.
Yeah.
You can't get it from.
That's going to go the opposite direction. It's going to dehydrate you.
Yeah, it's going to create another problem. Yeah. Like, it'll hydrate you, then dehydrate you.
Yeah.
And then all these other beverages that are out there, these sodas and whatevers, and you're not getting hydrated from those, and you're creating more harm by getting hydrated from those. So yeah, I mean it's no wonder, right, when you think about it.
Yeah. Well, and like you mentioned, like with the food piece of it, the argument, I can understand the argument from the standpoint of like, okay, there's water in there, but you're not getting it as quickly through everything because it's got to be processed through. And you're putting strain on all the body functions to just get the water into your system, when as opposed to just drink fluid. And so like from the standpoint of, one of the things that I tell people, especially people that come to me that are overweight and, whether they're borderline type 2 diabetes or they know that that's coming, and they're like, I've got to figure out something to fix myself. And one of the first things I like it. Yes, I take some things off the table as far as foods. Like, okay, we got to just get rid of these things because, we got to go cold turkey because they're just not going to work. But the number one thing I tell them is like, you whether it's right or wrong as far as the amount, I don't think it really matters because it's not too high. But I tell them your focus is to drink a gallon of water a day. In some people's body type, that might not be enough. That might be too much. But most people typically can't get there.
Mm-hmm.
Like but if you tell somebody to drink 24 ounces of water a day, it's A, probably not enough, and B, they probably won't even drink 24 because they're thinking, oh, I'm going to get close enough.
Exactly. Yeah, you do have to go a little higher. And then, it's like I mentioned earlier, usually the advice I give and what I do for myself, is I try to mix that intake during the day.
Yeah.
Try to mix it, get some from food, like we said, try to get some, 20% of what you eat of your fluid intake from food. So, which is good because it makes you think. Most people don't think what they're eating, and their intake tends to be low fluid. Fast foods doesn't have fluid. You know that. But then the rest, that 80%, I advocate mixing. So thinking about electrolytes again, if you drink just straight water, even absorption from the gut, there's the way I try to teach people, and I put this on the site too, is there's passive absorption of water, which just follows the osmotic gradient.
Right.
So, your body will absorb enough water to meet the osmotic gradient. So if you drank more at that moment in time, if you're sipping at something throughout the day, you don't have to worry about osmotic gradient as much. Because you put it in a little, your body absorbs it because osmotically it probably can. But if you chug a 16 ounce or as most people do to get enough water, we don't live in the wilderness, right? We sit at desks, and invariably sometimes we have to chug this thing. It's like, okay, I want to get my water in, and you grab your don't do plastic water bottles.
Right.
You grab your solid water bottle, not your plastic water bottle. Don't leach, don't get stuck. So you grab your water bottle and you chug it. Now what you're doing, fortunately and unfortunately, is you might be overwhelming the body's ability to absorb that much water, because it's going to take the first, say, 10 ounces and say, okay, osmotic gradient, I'm good. I'm going to absorb it passively. But then you get to a point where it can't absorb, or it can, but with difficulty. And that's where electrolytes come in handy. Electrolytes now, they aid the body because there's an active process of absorption through every membrane, whether it be from the gut to the blood to the cells. There is an active absorption and what happens is the body sees the electrolyte, sees the sodium, and sodium, it pulls it in through a receptor. It has to take water with that sodium.
Right.
And that's what we call the active process. Now, it does require energy as opposed to the passive that doesn't, but you want to do that because otherwise you may be losing some of that water into the gut, especially if you're eating an appropriate amount of fiber. You're binding some of that water and you're taking it down into the colon. Colon doesn't, a lot of water gets absorbed in the intestine. If it hits the colon, it's largely not getting absorbed. So that's where I always advocate. It's like, okay, fine. I get it. You're busy. You want to get your fluid in fits and spurts, but make sure you've got some electrolytes with it. So some gets absorbed passively, some gets absorbed actively. You're good to go. You know that water that you're drinking, you're absorbing at least the majority of it.
Right. So is that if somebody, and I'm thinking about my wife here because she tells me this all the time. She's like, I can't drink that much that fast because I'll immediately have to go to the bathroom because I immediately have to go urinate. Like it goes through that fast. And so it's like, that's basically what's happening, is that she's just not absorbing any of it. It's just going.
And that's another excellent reason for using electrolytes.
Right.
Say, let's just reduce it to the ridiculous. Sometimes you have to. Let's just imagine a world where sodium is a little on the higher side. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what the kidneys are going to do? They're going to hold that water back, right? So they're going to leave it in your system for a longer period of time. Right. It's one of the reasons, well, let's go back to kids who are dehydrated. What do? We give them Pedialyte, right? Which is a mix of water and electrolytes. Yeah. And we mix the two together, and this is for rehydration purposes. We mix the two together because, one, it helps them absorb it, as I mentioned earlier, and two, it holds it in the system longer. If you drink straight water, yes, exactly like you said, you're more likely to urinate it more quickly. Another good example, now we're exaggerating a little bit, but when's the last time you heard of somebody giving straight water as an IV? We don't do that.
Right. Yep.
Right. You give it with normal levels of sodium, normal levels, dextrose solutions, sodium solutions, et cetera. The ideal, and what that does is it tells the body to normal saline. It tells the body to hold on to that.
Right.
You can give normal saline without checking. You can give normal saline without checking sodium levels as long as you don't overdo it. Right. Why? Because it's euvolemic. I mean, that's just the way it is. It's that appropriate quantity, and we do that in medicine because it holds the water inside the body for longer periods of time. And so, yeah, you were exactly right when you were saying that to your wife. You drink straight water, some of it you're going to use. The moment, at any given moment in time, if you overdo it, you're going to eliminate a lot of it. Your body, your urine, your kidneys are going to say, wait a minute, sodium went low, water volume is a little high, let me get rid of some of that water. Even though the rest of the body might, at some point in time, if it waited just half an hour, the rest of the body might have told it, wait, I need that. I want that water. Don't get rid of it yet.
Right.
So electrolytes is a way of telling the body, hold on to it. Don't get rid of it too quickly.
Okay. So, and so speaking of one of the times that we obviously get dehydrated is when we sleep because we're not intaking water. And if we sleep for 8 hours, that's 8 hours where we're not getting any intake at all. And most of us get up when the first thing we do is we go to the bathroom and urinate because our kidneys have been working and everything's been processing. Yeah. And a lot of people, including myself, talk about, one of the first things you want to do from a health standpoint when you get up is drink 8 ounces of water. I prefer to tell people with a little lemon in it because that is more of a stimulant than caffeine is.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And so get some water with some lemon, 8 ounces or so, and to boost that hydration back up. Because otherwise you're starting the day already behind the 8 ball.
It's a great piece of advice. And that's water you can just drink straight. Yeah. Because like you said, you're relatively dehydrated at that point in time. Mm-hmm. You're going to absorb the water. Your body needs it. Your fluid levels are probably on the lower side, probably a little on the dry side. So yeah, I mean, it's a good piece of advice. And I want you to try an experiment for me. Okay. So I'm going to send you some Pure IV or choose another electrolyte drink. By all means, you don't have to use mine. Right. Just do a good one. Choose I'm not going to name them. That just
no, I know. Yeah.
that are made responsibly. There's a few good brands. I think mine is better, but there are a few good brands out there. And do that before you go to bed. Do a 16-ounce glass of water with that before you go to bed, and see how you feel when you wake up in the morning. You're going to feel less dry. How you wake up in the morning. We all wake up in the morning. You got the dry mouth. There's a little bit of cotton mouth, not too badly, but yeah, like you said, you're going to find it less.
Interesting.
Now, here's the interesting thing. The one thing I want you to watch is do it. And, one of the first things you think of, well, if I chug 16 ounces of water before I go to bed, I'm going to wake up in the middle of the night, no bladder, it doesn't matter whether you have issues or not. You could be young and still you're going to feel like you're going to feel that less because now you've got those electrolytes in there that are holding the water back, that are allowing it to be used better. So,
because that was the first thing I thought when you told me that. I was like, man, I'm about to get up at 2:00 and go to the bathroom. But if that's what's happening, then that makes total sense. And so so I'm actually rethinking right now my race strategy as well, because I try to drink enough right before I race, like during my warm-ups and everything. I'm like, I'm sipping a little bit, but I'm like, I don't want to sip too much, because if I have to have the urge to go to the bathroom and I'm 4K into a 5K race, I don't want to be thinking about hold my bladder in because I don't want to pee on myself.
Yeah.
I want to be thinking about run the last, 2.5 or 4 minutes of the race, or however far it is. And so you're making me rethink about, because I've been doing my electrolytes after to replenish, but maybe I need to do some before, not so much as a preventative on the electrolyte side of it, because I haven't had an issue with that, but maybe a preventative on the standpoint of not having the urge to go.
Yes. No, it's so the kidneys, that impulse that you stated, it comes from the bladder.
Right.
And the bladder responds to how much volume is in there. And the volume that is in there is coming from the kidneys. And the kidneys is sending that volume down the line to the bladder based on what it perceives in the body, right? So it's this cascade effect.
Right.
So like you said, you want to be careful at any given time by drinking a lot of straight water, because one of the things it's going to do is, it's going to lower sodium levels.
Right.
And then the kidneys will say, okay, well, now it's time to get rid of it. And then it's going to throw it down into the bladder, and the bladder is going to, so that one way of doing it is electrolytes. Having said that, you do want to be careful, because there's something called stretch receptors in the body as well. So the kidneys don't just respond to sodium levels. They respond, there's a whole, this fluid electrolyte homeostasis, it's a world into itself. And there are stretch receptors, and there's something called vasopressin, and responses to blood pressure. If you drink enough volume, even with electrolytes, that you bump your blood pressure up a little bit, or you push on those stretch receptors, your body's going to secrete hormones that go to the kidneys and say, eliminate water now.
Right.
Regardless of what the sodium is. Right. So yeah, you do want to, in a scenario, and that's where it's this ideal balance: drink with electrolytes, drink fluids. Even electrolytes with fluids, they're great for you, but you can't just chug 20, 30 ounces without the body responding in some way.
Right.
So in a scenario like yours, I would absolutely say, yeah, I would get some electrolytes before you start. It's going to hold that water, but I would still be careful how much water you drink before the race.
Right. Right. Yeah. You don't want to have a distended bladder or anything like that.
You don't want,
causing, discomfort.
Yeah, you throw 30 ounces of water, it doesn't matter what it's mixed with, your body has to respond in some way.
Right. So, and we talked about kidneys, and obviously that's a big, but so in one of the things that I experienced, and I don't have like a medical diagnosis of this or any of that, it was just like me going, okay, this happened, this was not good for my kidneys. And because in order to compete in college, I was injured, and it was to a point where I was like, I've just got it. This was before I was truly worried about myself being healthy, because it was all about, I've just got to compete. Like, I've got to get back on the track. I've got to do whatever I got to do. And so I was doing 16 Advil a day.
Oh, wow.
4 Advil 4 times a day to be able to handle the pain. And I did that for a year to be able to handle the pain of just like, I got to keep going. Right. My scholarship was on the line, all that stuff. And, a couple years later, and this was back when, what's his name? The San Antonio Spur that had a kidney replacement. So this was back in the 90s, but is back when and so I was putting pieces together of like, I started noticing that my kidneys would hurt, like the lower back would hurt, especially if I wasn't hydrating enough. And I noticed that I would get a fever really quickly.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I was like, this is interesting. And so, I stopped taking the Advil. I stopped competing. I stopped taking the Advil. I haven't had Advil in years now because of it, because now I'm very cautious of, I did damage to my kidneys. I know I did, because of all the chemicals that I ingested that they were trying to filter through.
Your liver.
Right. And I wasn't hydrating enough. Right.
Yeah.
Or I probably was, but I was on that borderline of just running so much in the Texas heat in the summer. Just, it's hard to stay there in the hydration place. And from like what you said, like urine is the number one, or can be an easy indicator of like watching your urine. And I'll admit there were a couple of times where I peed blood red, because it was just like, I knew I went way over the board. Right. And I felt it. Like, I understood, my body didn't react well. My running suffered, all those things. But I was just teetering on that, and I teetered too far. But so all that to say, like, the kidney damage can be like one of those chronic things that just happens slowly over time, simply because we're not hydrating enough, right?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's especially depending on if you're taking medications or other underlying issues. But yeah, hydration is important to any and every organ in the body. It doesn't matter. It's important to the kidneys. It's important to the heart. It's important to muscles. It's important to the brain. It acts as a cushion for the nervous system, for joints, for the brain. It acts as a cushion for the brain and the spinal column. There's so much that it does. Fat cells which typically surround organs. They're full of fluid. They're full of water.
Right.
So yeah, and then you're consuming all this Advil, and your kidneys are saying, okay, I need some of that water to protect me from this Advil, and your liver is saying, I need some of that water to protect me from this Advil. And it's not Advil. Advil is one of the, not much, especially.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, any medication that's it's got toxins in it. It's some level, and so it's a matter of like we said before, like keeping that system moving, because anything that's going to clog it up, and all of a sudden now things have, just like with your bowels, if your bowels aren't moving, then the stuff that's clogging up in there is fermenting and causing problems. And so like, if you're not getting rid of the toxins because you don't have enough water in you to keep things flowing, it's going to cause an issue somewhere.
Many wares.
Right.
I would argue. Many wares. There are a lot of it. It's why dehydration, the symptoms from dehydration, if you look at it, it spans so many different organ systems.
Yeah.
It really does, for so many different reasons.
Yep. So give us, I mean, you mentioned Pure IV, and you mentioned some of your, like, the reasonings for why, you developed it. And so like, and why it's different. Why, like, and you said you didn't necessarily want to go into the electrolyte beverage business.
I didn't technically. So people use the word supplements, and I always avoid using the word supplements. I like natural remedies, right? So to me, I've always called my products now Pure Nature, which is a vegetable and fruit supplement. That's a supplement,
right?
It's not meant to help the microbiome. It's not meant to help you sleep. It's not meant for the heart. It's meant as I'm not getting enough vegetables in every day. I take these 4 capsules and I'm good. Right? So that is called a supplement. Hydration, so Pure IV is not necessarily a natural remedy either. It probably comes along the lines of it's supplementing your water intake. So that's sort of how I got to why I wanted to do it. But more importantly, I mean, I'll be absolutely honest. One of the things, so I'm 56, and one of the reasons either end of the spectrum is more likely to be dehydrated. So kids are the most notorious, because they can't complain to say, I'm thirsty, right? So, and then the elderly, which I'm not putting myself in the elderly, but the elderly, it's the same thing more, because it's not that they can't complain, but the body's mechanisms for relating the issue of dehydration, and it's a very complicated way of saying it, but the body is not very good as we age at telling you drink more water. Right. So you're more likely to get dehydrated as you age, because the body stops telling you, hey, you're thirsty, and hey, whatever, and hey, it's so what I've noticed is that getting the right amount of water for me was starting to become a struggle. And that's what first put it on my radar. Right? Yeah. And then Vic, my business partner, he was relying on ultimately what broke the bank for, what broke the camel's back for us was he was starting to use these hydration products more and more and more, and started telling me about them. And what happened is that's where the Kara MD typical story took in, which is, oh my God, there's so much CRAP out there. Right. I mean, there's so much bad stuff out there. Yep. And so it's like, okay, I'm going to make one that I'm going to make it the way I want it to be. Right. I'm going to make something that myself and my staff and my customers, and something that I can take every day, which I do, and my business partner does, and our kids do, and all of our staff does. Like I said, it is the first product I've ever been worried that some of it, and this sounds horrible, but that I worry, because we almost can't keep inventory. It's proving to be that popular. But that's why I made it. I wanted something that was decent. I wanted something that didn't have too much sugar but had sugar in it. I wanted something that didn't have too much salt but had salt in it. I wanted something that had vitamin C in it. I wanted something that had the B vitamins. They put so little B vitamins in some of this other stuff that's out there. That's ridiculous. You're not I call it angel dusting. It's just a sprinkle of it, just so that they could say they could list it in the ingredients. I have, on an average, I have 15 times more B12 than just about any other product out there.
Right.
But that's the way I wanted it. So I made this sort of for myself, but I also made it for everybody else out there that if you're getting Pure IV, it's a good product. I mean, even the way even the way we packaged it, I'll send you some. I really want you to try it. I'm very curious for you to try it. And these individual packets, you just pour it in water, 60 ounces of water, and you move on. We tried to make it as simple as possible for people, because remember when I told you the last time when we had this discussion, magnesium is one of the most important deficiencies out there. Remember how I said that? I think magnesium is. I know vitamin D, everybody was on the vitamin D bandwagon. Everybody was, people were going to their doctors and saying, would you check my vitamin D?
Right.
I think magnesium is potentially a bigger deficiency. I've decided that water should be considered a deficiency. And that's one of the main reasons I did this.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you in that. And in what water can do for us long term if we actually make that change. I mean, I think if the only change somebody wants to make for their health this year is, whether it's to lose weight or get healthier or what, if all they would do is just drink more water, I think they would see some of those things happen.
Absolutely.
As a byproduct.
Thank you for reminding me about that. What was the study? Darn, I wish I could pull it up in front of me. It was a while ago. This was 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago. They did a study that they took a group of people that were trying to lose weight and they split them in half. Mm-hmm. And the one half said, no change, don't do anything different. And the other half, all they did was they increased their water intake to, I think it was 60 or 70 ounces. I don't remember the exact number.
Yeah.
And the people that took the water lost, I want to say over a period of 90 days, 12 pounds more than by doing nothing more. And then there was another study that they took a group of people and split them in half. These were not people that were necessarily trying to lose weight. They were not on any kind of diet. They were not. And they did the same thing. They split them in half and they said, you guys do nothing different. And they took the other group and they said, you increase your water intake. And again, it was 60 or 70 ounces. Same thing. 10 to 12 pounds of loss by changing nothing other than water intake within the 90 days or the 3 or 4 months that were whatever the study was.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. Weight loss it's a big deal. It's a big part of weight loss. No doubt about it.
Yep. Well, I think it makes sense when you actually stop and think about it. So many people don't stop and think about it. But if you just stop and think about, okay, what's my body made of? How does it operate better? And it's sort of like your car. Like if you're driving your car, you're going to change the oil because you're going to make sure it's it doesn't get too dirty and it doesn't get too clogged up. And And
it's funny you bring that up.
You're not changing your oil necessarily when you drink water, but you sort of are.
I have this thing we put on. I had them put it. So there's something I coined called natural osmosis equivalent. It's my version of why this product works better. I created it in a way that matches a natural osmosis equivalent. All right. So NOE, we call it NOE locally. And water alone or water with, it's the car going up or down the hill. If there's a little bit of dehydration, absorbing water is like a downhill travel. If there's not, it's like an uphill travel.
Yeah.
So your analogy is absolutely correct. I mean, water is like, for a car is like, it's like the fuel. It's like the whatever. It's like the electrolytes also.
You gotta have it. You gotta have both of them. But
you gotta have both.
I think what you explained is something that a lot of people miss is getting that proper level so that you hit the right balance. And it's not just, okay, I'm going to do a bunch of electrolytes and so I should be good. And it's not just, I'm just going to drink a ton of water and I should be good. You got to have that balance of both to really
increases absorption, holds the water longer. Yep. So if you think of it from those two aspects, when you're taking an appropriate amount of electrolytes and again, a simple sugar with the water, it improves the absorption and it holds it for longer. Yep. So those are the two main reasons, really.
Yep.
I mean, that's about as simple as we can make it, right?
Right. So I want to be respectful of your time. And so you talked about Pure IV. So and I'll tag that in the show notes so they can go and find it on your website.
4 flavors and a variety pack. Which one do I have here?
Okay.
Variety pack actually has 4. So there's 16 in each pack. It has 4 of each.
Awesome.
So So that's 4 flavors in a variety pack. And they are all, I love them all. Strawberry is my favorite, but passion fruit people love. Lemon lime seems to be the favorite, but I think they're all fantastic.
Yeah, that's great. Anything else you want to tell us about that's going on?
No, I think, usually I like these events to try to bring up if there's anything for the future. Right now, nothing. I've got a few things in the back of my head that I want to do, but nothing pressing. We literally just came out with Pure IV, and it's proving to be a mammoth. It's proving to be huge. I mean, just we sent out, what we usually do is we sent out a press release, and usually we get 5, 6, 7 from the media request samples.
Right.
I think we had 20 or 22 media requests for sample. Yeah. I mean, it was
awesome.
Really? More than double, literally more than double what we usually get. I mean, I can't name them. I let them come out. So major magazines, some major sports magazines reached out to us and said, "Hey, can I get samples of this?" So it's water.
I think that proves where people are with, like, we know that, or at least it's coming out, and more people are understanding that so many of these things are just, whether they're filled with chemicals or filled with sugar, they're just.
Some of them are horrible, Jerry.
Some of them are they're just made to taste so that you'll just keep buying them.
Yes,
but they're not actually made to help you. And people are starting to see that.
One of my major competitors, and I mean, they do a lot, and then there's a part of, we bring in and we taste and we analyze and we do, and I eventually come out with it. I think it's like drinking what's that tropical fruit drink? Kool-Aid. I swear it's like drinking Kool-Aid. Like, there's no way. There is no way this guy, and before I looked at the thing, because they were sugar and blah blah blah. It's like there is no way that this doesn't. And when I looked at the label, it's just chock full of I would love to name who it is, but I'm not going to. Yeah. But it was just, it's like, I drank some of it, and I think anything that tastes like this can't be good for you. Literally, the color, from the color to the whatever. It's like, no. There's a lot of junk out there, and people have to be careful.
Yeah, they definitely do. So I appreciate your time again. It's so great connecting with you. And like I said, I'll put all this stuff in the show notes so that people can find Pure IV and all the other products that you offer. That like you said, you're testing them correctly. You're making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do, and that I applaud you for, because there's a lot of people out there that aren't doing that.
Yeah, it's not easy, Jerry. It's really not easy. We make less money because of the way we create our products. Right. Our products cost more. I could make, on an average, I could save 30% on the cost of creating some of these products if I were just willing to go down that road. But I refused. And it's not what we do. It's just absolutely not what we do. So, did I give you for your followers a discount? Did we give you a discount?
No, we didn't.
Special discount. No. Okay. I've got to remember to do that then.
Okay.
I will, and then you can put it in the comments, and we'll do it special for your followers on all products. And I'll do it. A blanket covers all products.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you.